So welcome everybody to Serendipity Story Time, and pleasure for me to be here today. My name is Amanda O'Shea, the Loving Life Coach from the Serendipity Experience, and I have a very, very special guest from Vancouver, BC, Shenan Charania. Welcome, Shenan. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
Yeah, pleasure. So I would love to invite you to share with our lovely guests and our lovely listeners a little bit about your story, if that's okay. I remember us having our first conversation, earlier in this year. I think it was when lockdown had started and we were both volunteers on one of these coaching Zoom rooms. And
Right.
we were introduced to each other because we both had this sort of interest of working with young people. And I heard you sharing a bit of your story, and it really interested me. Would you be happy to sort of talk about, how life was sort of going for you back then, and how you kind of got into doing the coaching work that you're doing today?
Sure. Yeah. So do you want me to just start from the beginning of?
Yeah. Just start from the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah.
Okay. So as you mentioned, I've been doing coaching now, and I've been doing that for about 6 years, just over 6 years. And how I got into it, well, I guess I'll go a little bit backwards, and you can stop me or pause me wherever if you want to, and ask questions if you want to. Uh, So I guess, my journey of coaching, before coaching, I used to own a restaurant. It's called Tim Hortons. It's a sort of a cafe and bake shop restaurant that's here as a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that for, I don't know, I would say it's a 6 year journey itself. It was because I was working in one, and I sort of got to learn the business and all the systems around the business before I became an owner of one. And when I was about 2 years into ownership of a restaurant, making good money, life was good, seemingly good, right? Like materialistically, lucrative business, obviously, making over $2 million a year, was doing quite well. But I was not feeling the sense of fulfillment that I was looking for. I was not getting it in that business, and I just didn't know that that's what I was looking for. So that's when I started to explore coaching, and that was around 2013, when I started to go like, what is going on? I seem like I have everything, but feels like I'm missing something, and I don't know what it is. And so I hired a coach, and as I hired a coach, and got asked all these different powerful questions that I've never been asked before, digging deeper into myself, I started to see that there are many, many things inside of me that I have not considered as fulfilling. I've been always chasing this money route and thinking that that's where my life is going to be enhanced from. And so in that process, I started to see that, there's something that I'm not paying attention to, which is a more, I guess, a more rounded way of life, right? Like a more wholesome approach to life. Like there's something more to life than what I have and what I'm after in my daily operations right now. Like there's got to be something more. And coaching helped me see that by uncovering of processes of like, what is it that you're really passionate about in life? How do you define success? That's one of the questions I never really considered, because to me, growing up, success just equaled money, right? Like that's what success is, money. I mean, why look further? And so to consider that success is not only money, and it's a lot more than money. It's relationships, and for some people it's contribution, and for some people it's the way they want to shape their lives in ways that is fulfilling for them in the type of work that they do, or their passions or whatnot. So I started to look at that and really consider that as a reality. And that's when I got interested in coaching, because coaching made such a big difference to me in that aspect, just to uncover more of myself. It was transformative for me. And so I said, well, what if I got into coaching? Because that seems like a really fulfilling direction where you're contributing to people's lives in a very authentic way, and you're also growing yourself, right? All the time when you're having these coaching conversations, we always grow as a coach as well. And so that was kind of the gist of how I got into coaching, and I enjoyed it. I loved it very much in 2013. I experimented with it, and then in 2014, I finally got into it and got my own business registered, and ever since then been learning different ways of expanding myself as well in that direction. So that's been cool. Now, the story that I think you want to hear is about my past and when I was growing up. So that happens to be before the Tim Hortons, before getting into the restaurant business and becoming an owner of a restaurant. I was born in Kenya, in East Africa, and I was brought to Vancouver by my parents when I was about around the age of 12, right? Just going into teenage years. And the reason they wanted to bring me and my brother here is because, Canada obviously has much better life, much better education system, much better healthcare system, a much better safety here, right? Much less crime, first world country, everything that is the opposite of what it is in Kenya. I mean, Kenya is a lovely place with beautiful people, and I miss it a lot in so many different ways. But of course, the education system is suffering there. The healthcare system is not the greatest. There's always safety issues. There's a high rate of criminal activity there all the time. And so it's just unsafe and to bring your kids up in an environment like that. So they thought we would bring them to Canada and have a better life for them. Now, for me, I faced a deep culture shock when I came here. I really didn't know how to react to what I was facing, because obviously I'd never been in any other country besides Kenya. And so when I got to Vancouver here at the age of 11, I didn't know how to react to my surroundings. I was facing all these, obviously a different environment, different people, different language, different culture, different ways of dressing and talking and whatnot, right? So I didn't know exactly how to react, and I was getting bullied a lot in elementary school when I first started. And again, I just didn't have any idea on how to respond to what I was experiencing, and eventually I started to respond with a lot of aggression, getting sick and tired of being bullied, so I'm going to fight back and stand up for myself and all that stuff. And so I did that and got into a lot of fights because of that, because I started fighting back. Now, one of the things that ran through my mind that I remember very clearly, which I didn't actually realize till much later in life, when I was in reflection of like what actually happened when I was younger, was that when I was getting bullied, I remember thinking to myself, there must be something that is unlikable about me. Otherwise, why would people not like me? You know? And I was literally thinking, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, otherwise, why would people not like you? So me not knowing that that's just my thinking going on in my head took that to be a reality. It's like, oh yeah, Shenan, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. That makes sense. That's logical. Something unlikable about you. So obviously, me believing that, I started to become likable. Try and become likable in ways all the ways that you can, so that you won't get bullied. And so one of the ways that I did that was to start, people pleasing. What is it that people want and what pleases them? Forget what I want and what's genuine for me. What do people want? And one of the things I seen was that when I started fighting back, when I started standing up for myself when I was getting bullied, I heard people in the background saying, "Yeah, that's it, go for it, right? That stand up for yourself, Shenan." And again, me hearing that, I was thinking, "Ooh, this is what people like, right? So this is what I'll do more of." And so I started getting more into fights. And by the time I was 13, going into high school, I got into so many fights and got kicked out of so many schools, one school after another school after another school, that I just started to kind of hang out with kids that were getting into fights and getting kicked out of school and, not going to school. So the next thing you knew, the next thing you know, what that leads to is doing things that are, that kids do when they're not going into school, which is getting into smoking weed and that sort of thing. And so between the ages of 13 and 15, I became heavily involved in that. I was basically just, I don't know what I was doing. I was just trying to please people, right? So I really just wanted people to like me. So I was smoking weed to getting into fights to whatever. Now, it went so fast for me that I didn't realize by the time it happened that I was not only getting into drugs, but getting into selling drugs and getting kicked out of school in such a fast pace that I got involved in just selling drugs and doing drugs. Right. So that was my life till about 15 years of age. At around 15 years of age, I dropped out of school. I just felt like, there's no place for me here. People don't understand me here. The boys over here do understand me. I'm going to go with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And before I knew it, I was heavily involved into a gang-related lifestyle. So that meant me, not only selling drugs, but getting into shootouts and involvement with guns and selling guns and all that sort of thing. And that continued. That was sort of my lifestyle till about 21, 22 years of age. Got really deeply involved in that direction and really didn't see anything come out of it. I was just um, unaware really of anything outside of that bubble that I had put myself into, which was really again fundamentally built on I hope people like me. It just took it too far, I think.
Oh, do you know, it's heart, and it's heart touching, right, to hear you like talk about that. Thank you for sharing and so honestly. And I haven't heard the whole story, Shenan, because I'd heard a small bit before. That's why I knew I was really interested. Because can you imagine if somebody said to you back then what you would be doing, whether that you would have become a restaurant owner or that you would become a coach or that you would have cleaned your act off? It would have felt like a million miles away, right? It would have felt like a
Absolutely.
different world.
Yeah.
And so I think something that touched me with this, I had this sort of heart touching experience last year to want to work with the youth or with the young people after working in the recovery center. So dealing with people that were at the height of their addictions or people that were very full of anxiety or had attempted suicide or all of those sort of issues that we see inside treatment centers. And again, the same stories I kept hearing, oh, when I was 12, when I was 13, when I was 14, when I was 15. And it's like, and that was my big kind of push to look at, right, how can I best work with this age group or that age group? Like, if we don't know, if no one's ever talked to us about what we've attached our well-being to, or if we've never even noticed that we like to be included, or we think we need to fit in, or if that's never been something that we speak about with our siblings or around the kitchen table, because it's not what we talk about. So that stuff is new. It's like, my thing was, oh my goodness, why are we waiting for people to end up like in prison and being arrested and in hospitals because something's happened in a shootout or a stabbing, or why are we waiting until people are in trouble after taking, not just having drugs as an experience, which probably a lot of the youth, but people that their habits turn into sort of addictions and I was like, how can I be most helpful? And I think whether we've had a really like colorful kind of growing up childhood like what you're talking about, which sort of happened, or somebody has grown up with they've never had to change country, they've never had to change home, they've never had to change school, they're still actually going through very, very similar things innocently without even realizing it. Yeah. So I think I saw something really recently about myself, looking into that subject. Well, what have I attached my well-being to, or what do people in general attach their well-being to, attach their happiness to? And that subject that you sort of mentioned about fitting in, that had kind of come up for me a bit. But what really came up for me was that being included. It's like, like looking at that a lot of that I really saw, like I used to really like, and I still do like, to be included. And like, it wasn't until I started looking at that really, more when I was looking, like talking about a group of children, and it was like, oh yeah, I used to do that, but in a very different way, right? In a very different way. And I see now that I'm so grateful for understanding what we understand about how our mind works and how our psychological system works and how predictable it is, and how it just makes sense when we understand what's happening, because, well, our behavior, there's something I could never get my head around. Behavior, especially bad behavior, I couldn't get my head around it, but it's something so helpful for me, having an understanding about where behavior comes from, and in that way, and how innocently what I might list as bad behavior, like how innocently that gets created, because we kind of, that's just the implication of a confused, off track, misguided thinking kind of going on. That's par for the course. That's what's going to happen. And the more I don't understand what's going on up here, the more complicated I keep making it innocently, or it makes it, the system makes it. And so it makes sense that, like what you say, the system kept repeating itself. You go to one school, it's like you didn't learn, nothing scared you. You didn't have this kind of wake up call because you got expelled from one school. It was just, it makes so much sense to me now how this system repeats until there's a shift. That shift that you start to see, that doesn't make sense to do, or you're locked up, or whatever it is, that's happened. So really seeing that, even now, like I can notice, if people were to say, oh, we all went here, the first thing that kind of goes on, I guess, in my own ego, whatever it is, oh, you didn't ask, oh, I didn't get invited to that, or like I catch it. That I'm not concerned that I didn't go now. I'm cool with that. I've got plenty going on in my world, but that's where my kind of thinking sometimes takes me, and I don't look out for that. I'm not looking out for it, but it's like, whoa, I wish I had known that all those years ago. Those years ago, and I see, working with children now, the kind of stuff is like, oh, they didn't invite me to play in their little circle, or they didn't invite me to their birthday party, or, this exclusion or an inclusion. And as children, I see, and as adults too, if we're not very happy with people, if we believe that other people can, make us feel angry or frustrated, we're very good at very sort of almost quietly excluding people as their punishment. It's like school playground stuff carries on, like it's always been there, and it kind of always is there until we realize what's happening, and why maybe we're doing something, and why somebody else is acting in a way in their own insecurity, and me and my insecurity. So there's a sort of invitation of, I don't know where I'm going with this, but whether we have had this kind of like big story in our youth, or whether we've just been growing up, with everything that seems like circumstances seem to be tickety-boo. We've grown up in a very stable family and secure family. our thinking, a misunderstanding of how thinking works, can pull us all over the place, regardless of our circumstances. And I think that's what I noticed a lot when I was working in the treatment center, especially if family members were like bringing somebody in. They always wanted to like make it clear that like we're a good family, you know, like like, you know, we're good people. Like it was as if like, oh, well, look how my son's turned out. Like that means that he's come from sort of some rough family, and it's just not true. And I'm like, I know, and I know you are, and I know you're good, and so is he actually. Behind all his misunderstanding and his off-track behavior, if you like, he's good too, right? He's from good stock. And so, how do you think? Like, do you think going back now, looking back when you were in the midst of your sort of ganging, you know, when you were playing that game, do you think that anybody like you or me or any of the people that we work with could have helped in any way? Do you see that you had to play that out and see it for yourself? Or do you think that if there'd been any kind of intervention or sharing, do you think you would have listened? Do you think that you would have, you know, you would have been open to hearing what you heard 6 years ago?
I think so, yes. In a way that if there's different directions available, right? Like for me, I didn't see many directions available. I took the directions that I thought were available and I sort of expanded into that direction. So if there's different directions available or different directions I'm exposed to, I would have maybe played around with a few more and seen, you know, because the truth is that nobody is really interested in, you know, getting themselves into a drug habit or a gang-related lifestyle. No, that's not their interest. But if they see nothing else, then that might be more interesting. If they see something more troubling than that, right? Drug is an escape, or gang-related lifestyle brings you a sense of belonging. So if I can find a sense of belonging somewhere else, maybe gang-related lifestyle wouldn't be my first choice. So in other words, if there's, what I mean by direction is like, if there were more people asking me what I'm curious about, what am I passionate about, how do I see the world, what do you want to do when you grow up with the world, what would you like to see change about the world, and how do you think you would contribute towards that, and sort of just tease that direction, I might have gone into that direction. I didn't see much of that happening in my world. Granted, you know, this was 25, 30 years ago. There wasn't much of that happening in any school system, which now, thankfully, a lot has changed. And that's a common dialogue. I speak into schools regularly, as you know, except for this year, of course, because of COVID. But yeah, that there's a lot of that now. There's a lot of programs. There's a lot of mentors. There's a lot of teachers. There's a lot of people bringing that sort of dialogue in to say, hey, what else are you interested in? And kids get involved in that.
And I see even in the music, right, you know, so the kids now are listening to these inspirational speakers, they're listening to motivational speakers, they're listening to rap artists, they're listening to I hear a lot of the same message being shared.
Yeah.
You know, so that there is a different, but yet it seems like we're in trouble out there, right? There's still we've still got a big problem with our gangs, and a big problem with youth, and a big problem with drugs, and a big problem with people self-harming, and a big problem with suicide attempts or thinking about. So we still know that there's a kind of, whatever you want to call it, mental health crisis happening, even though there's so much more exposure to hearing something, and it's still just being part of that inquiry. Like, okay, well, how can we help? Like how is it? How can we help? So we're going into schools. You're doing your thing. Everybody in our whole sort of community is doing what they think is the right thing. I love it when the Beyond Recovery gang. So good friend Jacqueline Hollows, and she's created the programs that are similar to the programs that you and I have, where they go into the prisons and they had an amazing results by sharing it in the prisons in the UK. And, you know, the prisoners there who really heard it, who had all come from the gang warfare or the drug, you know, so the sort of, like the gang game, you know, they would come from that kind of, they'd come from the drug world. They'd all themselves been involved in drugs or selling drugs, or tended to be the same, you know, same stories crop up again and again and again. When they hear something that's really impactful for them and they go back out into the streets and they're now sharing it, seems really powerful that people are kind of hearing it from their own. You know, they're hearing it. The younger children are hearing it from the older people that have kind of had a realization, who understand their talk, who understand, like, yeah, I was you too. You know, I was the bad boy. And now I'm the good boy helping the bad boys, you know, kind of. And so, yeah, there's just that continual, I don't know if anything occurs to you, or I don't know, anybody who's watching or listening to this has an idea of, like, you know, how do you see that we can help? I'm sure, like you, Shenan, I feel like I've got one of the biggest secrets in the universe to share. We try our different ways, really being able to connect with the youth, right? Whether that's through a youth club or through, I don't know, small groups or wherever they are, but trying to get people to sign up, let's say, to come and do a course in their own time, isn't like it being standard as something that's on the curriculum in schools, right? We don't have to sell that if that was the way forward. If that's you know, that's what iHeart's mission and dream and vision is, to get it on to get this sort of, teach this understanding to young people as standard, you know, on their school curriculum, so everyone gets to hear it. But I don't know how many years we are away from that really happening.
Right.
That could be a slow trickle, right?
Yeah.
So I guess apart from doing, you know, we're doing what we see, we create videos like this, we're talking about it, we share it. What do you think that you see of your understanding today about how your mind works? What do you think is the most helpful thing? If we had a 15-year-old watching this video now who knew that they were kind of going off track a bit, their thinking was off track because they realize they relate to you. Oh yeah, I'm like that. I just want to be included and be part of a gang and feel like I've got my tribe around me, but they're not really very comfortable in what they're doing. They spend a lot of time worrying or nervous or scared, or, you know, they don't really want to be doing what they're doing. They've just kind of got themselves in and it looks like they can't get themselves out. What do you think is what you have seen later in life that helped you realize that you didn't need to do that anymore? You don't need to do that now in your world now. You don't need everyone to like you. You're not trying to impress people. What do you think it is that you saw?
Well, I think the most simple and most helpful thing would be to understand what thinking really is. You know, that thinking just occurs and it happens to us just as a heartbeat happens to us. I mean, we're not making it happen. And for me to really see that thoughts just occur on their own and that they're not reality as much as real as they look, that is life-changing. You know, I don't have to act on that. I can sit back and have that pass through me if that doesn't feel good. And I don't have to jump into action to the nervousness or worrying feelings that I have, or the fearful feelings that I have, because they're all products of my thinking. And so to learn just the simple fact of what thinking is and how it occurs into us and fades on its own accord, right? Thinking fades on its own accord. We don't have to push it away. We don't have to get rid of it. We don't have to change it. It changes on its own. If I would have learned that earlier when I was 13, thinking things like, oh, maybe I'm unlikable, or maybe I have to do something that's likable. And if I would have seen that as just thought, if I would have put it this way, if I would have waited 5 minutes for another thought, maybe my next 10 years would have been different.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have acted on those thoughts.
I know. And it is seeing that, isn't it? Like that way thought just arises within our psychological system. You know, it gets brought to life as feelings. And seeing that is sort of what happens. And then the pattern repeats, the system repeats. You know, I used to say, right, we're alive. If we're alive, we're thinking. If we're thinking, we're feeling. System repeats. Like it's worth its weight in gold to understand what we would call the mechanics of how our mind works. The description of that was really helpful for me. That was really, really helpful for me. I think the biggest thing was seeing that I felt, you know, in that way, like we talked about, I felt my thinking about something. I didn't feel something directly. I was always feeling my own thinking about it, the thinking that was being created inside of me. So, you know, it took a while to get my head around that. I didn't catch that the first time kind of somebody told me that. And the more that then, you know, the more that you see it, the more obvious it becomes. And it's like, wow, how could we have got, I was 43 when I got introduced to the mechanics of how the mind works. It's like, well, how did I get myself here? You know, how did I get myself here? But I did somehow, like every other human being on the planet is. Whether we understand how it works or we don't, it's still working.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think just when we keep it simple and just explain that, it's magical. So it's truly magical. So I want to thank you, Shenan, for sharing your story. And I'm going to invite everybody to get more curious with what it is that we're pointing to. Get curious about this understanding of how the mind works. If people want to find you, Shenan, or you know, see what you're up to, have you got any details that you can share?
Sure. My Facebook and Instagram, I'm quite active on that, which is just, you know, my full name, Shenan Charania. So I interact on my Facebook page. My Instagram handle is the same. My LinkedIn handle is the same. Or you can even contact me through my website, which is www.shenancharania.com.
Oh, all nice and easy, hey?
All nice and easy. That's a cool thing about having a unique name.
Yeah, that's nice and easy. Well, good stuff. So, I want to wish you a peaceful winter, I guess. You're the same. Here, we're in Spain. Today's the 4th of November, and it's getting chilly. It's just getting cold. How's it over there?
It is getting chilly here too. Yeah, we're just going into winter, but
yeah,
it's going to be nice, I think. I like the cold season.
Yeah, cozy blankets,
right.
And
exactly.
Hot cups of tea and all that stuff. Have a peaceful, have a peaceful autumnal winter, and we'll catch up soon. But thanks ever so much for being with us today.
Well,
Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Amanda.
Really enjoyed
Thank
that.
you for having me.
Yeah, lots of love to you, Shenan, and love to everybody. Bye.
Bye for now.